the silent glow of the Scottish sunset, Prince William stood on the edge of history and love. No royal advisor, no grand ballroom, no flashing cameras. Just the sound of wind, a hidden lodge, and the heartbeat of the future queen, Kate Middleton. But what really happened that night at the rugged hills of Kenya's Lewa Safari Camp? Why did the royal guards whisper later? We had never seen the prince like this before. Tonight, we uncovered a proposal that changed not just two lives, but the very heart of the monarchy itself. Before we step into this breathtaking chapter of royal romance, make sure you've hit subscribe and give this video a like if you love stories where royalty meets raw humanity. Share this with someone who still believes in destiny, because this story proves that even the future King of England can be completely swept off his feet. IT began quietly, as most royal stories do, with a secret no one was supposed to know. For weeks, the royal guard stationed at Balmoral Castle noticed something different in Prince William. He was still composed, polite, and precise, as a future king should be. But behind those calm blue eyes, there was a new kind of restlessness, one that even the oldest guard, a veteran of 20 years' service, couldn't quite explain. The young prince had fallen silent during hunts. He skipped evening gatherings. He spent hours alone, staring at the fading Scottish horizon. And when one of his aides asked if he was all right, William simply smiled and said, "I'm planning something important." But even the crown's tightest circle didn't know the full truth. The truth was that the heir to the throne was about to risk everything, reputation, privacy, and even the protocols of the palace, for a single moment of love. The story started far from the gold-edged corridors of Buckingham Palace. It began in the cold winds of the Scottish Highlands, where William had first learned to find peace, and where he could, for a short while, be himself. Since childhood, Balmoral had been his sanctuary. The stone walls held generations of royal memory, laughter, grief, and duty, yet for William, it was the one place where he could drop the mask of the monarchy. Here, he could walk without a camera's gaze, ride without an escort, and think without counsel, and that was where he decided. He would propose to Kate Middleton. He didn't want a castle. He didn't want ceremony or headlines. He wanted something real, something that belonged only to them, a moment beyond the reach of history's judgment. So, in absolute secrecy, he began planning a journey that would lead them far away to a place no one would expect. Only 3 people in the royal household knew about it: his private secretary, one trusted aide, and a member of a protection team, an experienced guard named Thomas Green. Green had seen William grow up. He had watched him salute at Diana's funeral, and later walked beside the Queen at public events with quiet dignity. But this, Green would later say, was the first time he saw William nervous. One evening, William handed him a sealed envelope. "Arrange it exactly as written," he said softly. "No press, no announcements, and tell no one, not even your wife." Inside was a plan, a discreet trip to Kenya under the guise of a private holiday. Green's eyes scanned the details: Lewa Safari Camp, a secluded lodge in the middle of wildlife territory, protected yet isolated. The prince's note ended with 6 simple words: "This is where I'll ask her." Weeks later, the team moved like shadows. The guards traveled ahead under diplomatic clearance, checking routes, ensuring silence. Even Kate didn't know the full reason for the trip. She thought it was just another quiet getaway. But William had already chosen the ring, his mother's sapphire engagement ring, the same one that once graced Princess Diana's hand. He carried it everywhere that week, hidden inside a worn leather pouch. Sometimes, late at night, he'd take it out and just look at it. The deep blue gem shimmered in the low light, a piece of his mother's legacy, and a reminder what love could mean even in the face of tragedy. He was haunted by that duality, beauty and burden. To love as a royal was not a private thing. It meant exposure, scrutiny, endless comparisons. And yet, with Kate, he felt something that stripped away all that weight: simplicity, normalcy. The guards noticed his demeanor shift again as the day of departure neared. He wasn't just anxious, he was contemplative. Green later recalled that the prince stood by the airstrip before they left, watching the rain streak across the highlands. "Sir," Green had asked, "if I may, why Kenya?" William smiled faintly. "It's where I feel close to her," he said, meaning Diana, and it's where I think Kate will understand who I really am. It was a rare admission. Royals didn't talk like that. Not to guards, not to anyone. But that night, there was no hierarchy. Only a man hoping that the woman he loved would say yes. The flight was long, crossing continents in clouds, but as the small jet descended over the vast plains of Lewa, the tension broke into quiet wonder. Golden grass stretched endlessly beneath the horizon. Herds of elephants wandered lazily below, and acacia trees painted shadows against the amber sun. Kate looked out the window and whispered, "It's beautiful." William smiled. He didn't answer. He didn't need to. The royal guard stationed discreetly near the lodge maintained distance, but they too felt the gravity of what was about to happen. Their radios stayed silent. Orders were simple: no movement, no interference. At dinner that night, under lanterns flickering in the warm breeze, William seemed unusually quiet. Kate later recalled that she thought something was troubling him. He kept glancing at his pocket, then at the sky, and, in a way, he was troubled, for once, not by politics or the press, but by the raw, human fear of asking the most important question of his life. The guards remained outside, keeping their posts near the camp's perimeter. Green, standing closest, caught fragment of laughter drifting through the open window. He would later say that for a moment, even the guards forgot their duty. They smiled, because even they could sense it. This wasn't just a royal evening. It was history quietly taking shape. When the couple retired for the night, the guards switched to quiet watch rotations. Somewhere beyond the tent, a lion's roar echoed in the dark. The sky stretched wide, heavy with stars. Inside, William barely slept. The ring rested on a small wooden table, glinting in the lantern light. Tomorrow, he thought, everything changes. He stepped outside for air, feeling the African wind brush against his face. Green, nearby, didn't speak, but he noticed something striking. The prince wasn't nervous anymore. His expression had changed to calm determination. It was a calm before the most personal storm of his life. By dawn, the camp was still. The guards began their morning sweep. William, awake since before sunrise, sat with a cup of tea, staring toward the hills. He whispered something softly, a private vow, before tucking the ring back into his pocket. And as the first light hit the horizon, casting gold across the land, Thomas Green quietly radioed his team with a short message. "The eagle is ready." He didn't know then that those simple words would mark the beginning of a story the world would one day call the royal proposal like no other. The African dusk fell like a velvet curtain. The sky turned from gold to deep violet, and the campfires flickered softly against the chill breeze sweeping through Lewa. It was quiet, the kind of silence that feels alive, humming beneath the stars. Prince William stood outside their wooden lodge, one hand in his pocket, fingers brushing the edge of the ring pouch. For a man who'd grown up under relentless spotlights, this was the first moment he'd ever felt completely unseen and utterly human. Kate was inside, reading under the lantern light. She looked peaceful, unaware of the storm in his chest. He exhaled long and slow. "All right," he muttered under his breath. This is it. Hours earlier, he'd told the royal guard to retreat a few hundred meters out, giving them the illusion of solitude. "You'll stay within signal," he'd said to Thomas Green, "but give us space. I want this to be ours." Green hesitated, then nodded. "Understood, sir." As night deepened, the guards formed a quiet perimeter beyond the acacias. The sounds of Africa filled the darkness. Crickets, the distant call of a hyena, the faint rustle of elephants moving through grass. Inside the lodge, only two people existed. William entered slowly, the ring now hidden inside a small leather pouch that once belonged to his mother. He sat across from Kate at the low wooden table, pretending to admire the flickering flame. She smiled. "You've been quiet all day. You all right?" He hesitated. His throat felt dry. "Yeah, just thinking." "About what?" He tried to find words, royal decorum, duty, eloquence. But all that came out was, "About how lucky I am." Kate laughed lightly, unaware how close he was to changing her life forever. "You sound sentimental tonight." He leaned back, watching her. The way her hair caught the firelight, the calm confidence that had grounded him through years of chaos. He thought of Diana. He thought of his father's long road to happiness. And for a fleeting second, he wondered if this was his chance to break that old royal curse, to love freely without the weight of crown pressing on his heart. Later, when Kate stepped outside to look at the stars, William followed quietly. Above them, the sky was an ocean of silver light, infinite, timeless. She turned to him and said softly, "You don't get skies like this back home." "No," he replied, "you don't." There was a pause. The kind of pause that fills the air before something historic happens. William reached into his pocket. His heart pounded so hard he could hear it. "Kate," he began, his voice low, "I've been carrying something with me, something that belongs to my past and my future." She turned, puzzled. "What do you mean?" He opened the pouch. The sapphire caught the moonlight, blazing deep blue, like the eyes of the woman who'd worn it before. Kate gasped softly. "Is that—" "It was my mother's," he said quietly. "She wore it when she said yes to my father. I kept it because it reminds me that love, real love, doesn't belong to the palace or the press. It belongs to the people brave enough to choose it." Her eyes glistened. The wind carried the faint echo of the savannah, lions in the distance, whispering ghosts of history. "Kate," he said, his voice trembling just enough to sound human, "will you marry me?" For a moment, the world stood still. The stars seemed to hold their breath. Even the guards, watching from a distant ridge through their binoculars, sensed the silence shift. Thomas Green whispered over the radio, "It's happening." Inside the circle of moonlight, Kate covered her mouth, tears already rising. "William, are you sure?" He laughed softly, the laugh of a man who'd never been more certain. "I've never been sure of anything." She stepped closer, her voice breaking into a whisper. "Then yes." He slipped the ring onto her finger, and the weight of the world seemed to lift. The guards couldn't hear the words, but they saw the embrace. They saw the prince, the future king, hold the woman who had just agreed to walk beside him through everything that lay ahead. One of the guards murmured, "God bless them." Green simply nodded. "That's the look of a man who's found peace." Minutes later, the camp came alive again. The couple returned inside, laughter spilling through the thin canvas walls. William poured 2 glasses of champagne, a bottle smuggled in by the guards for the occasion. "To your mum," Kate said softly, raising her glass. He smiled, emotion tightening his voice. "And to you, for saying yes." They toasted under the African sky, unaware that miles away, a royal aide was preparing for the moment this news would break, a storm of headlines that would follow them forever. But for now, it was just them, 2 souls against the universe. Green and his team stayed on guard through the night, silent and unseen. At one point, he looked through the tent's faint glow and saw William writing something in a small notebook. Later, the world would never know what he wrote, but the guards believed it was a letter to his mother. Near midnight, the radio crackled softly. "Base, this is Alpha One. The Eagle has landed," Green reported in a low voice. "Copy that," came the reply. "Maintain silence." The guards stood under the vast sky, rifles slung, hearts strangely warm. They weren't just protecting royalty that night. They were witnesses to a human story that transcended titles and crowns. The next morning, the first rays of sun crept into the lodge. Kate woke to find William already awake, gazing at the horizon. She smiled. "Still feels like a dream." He turned, smiled faintly. "That's how I want to stay." Outside, the guards were already packing up equipment. Green caught a glimpse of the prince holding Kate's hand as they stepped out into the sunlight. For the first time in years, William looked completely free. Green would later write in his private report, "No security breaches. Proposal successful. Emotional state. Unprecedented happiness." And though no royal archive would ever publish that line, it would live on quietly among those who were there, the men who guarded history's most intimate royal moment. As the convoy prepared to depart, William paused to speak to Green. "Thank you," he said simply. Green nodded. "Congratulations, sir. The men are honored." The prince looked back toward the lodge one last time. "So am I." The engine started. Dust rose. The camp faded into the golden horizon, and the legend of proposal in the wild began its silent journey toward the world. For years, the royal guards have been the silent backbone of the British monarchy, ever present, ever loyal, and ever invisible. Their duty was not just protection. It was silence. They saw everything but spoke of nothing. Yet among the guards who stood watch that fateful night in Kenya, a quiet reverence lingered long after the proposal. Something had changed, not just for Prince, but for the men who had seen it unfold. Back in London, weeks later, the royal routine resumed. The palace corridors were polished, the schedule rigid, the press relentless. To the public, everything appeared seamless. Another royal engagement announced with grace and precision. But behind closed doors, the guards carried with them a secret memory. Thomas Green, the senior officer, was debriefed by the head of royal security. "Any incidents?" the official asked. "None," Green replied, then paused. Except what?" Green hesitated. For a man trained to speak only in facts, he struggled to find words. "Except that I've never seen His Royal Highness look more human." The official frowned. "Explain." "He didn't look like a prince that night. He looked like a man in love, vulnerable, at peace." The official said nothing, only nodded and noted something in his file. But Green knew this wasn't something that could be written down. It was something that had to feel, that rare moment when duty meets humanity. The younger guard began to talk among themselves, quietly, in the way soldiers do. "Did you see how he looked at her?" one said. "Aye," another replied, "like he'd found home." They were trained not to gossip, but they couldn't help it. They had protected kings, queens, and diplomats, but never before had they witnessed something that felt so real. To them, that night in Kenya wasn't just a royal proposal. It was proof that beneath the uniform, beneath the lineage, there was still a beating heart, capable of fear, joy, and hope. One guard, Corporal Mason, later wrote in his private journal, "That night taught me something. Even kings are men first. Titles come after." A few days after returning from Africa, William invited his Corps Protection team to a private room at Clarence House. It was rare, unprecedented, even. He poured tea himself, breaking protocol. "You've all done more than your duty," he began. "You gave us space, privacy, something we don't often get." The men were silent, uneasy at being thanked by a royal. William smiled. "I just wanted you to know, you didn't guard a prince that night. You guarded something far more important, a promise." Green felt his throat tighten. In all his years of service, he'd never heard such words from a royal. Not once. Later, when the engagement was made public, the guards watched the official interview on TV. William and Kate sat side by side, hands intertwined, smiling shyly under the camera lights. When the interviewer asked, "Did you expect a proposal?" Kate laughed, shaking her head. "It was very romantic," she said. "We were in Kenya, just the two of us. It was perfect." And the guards, watching from the security barracks, exchanged quiet glances. They knew just the two of us wasn't quite true, but they also knew the meaning behind it. The real magic wasn't the proposal itself. It was the world they had helped protect, the privacy that made it possible. As the months went by, the memory faded from official schedules, replaced by public duties and headlines about the royal wedding. Yet every guard who had been there carried a piece of that night, like a medal unseen. Some spoke of the way the prince's voice trembled when he said the words. Others remembered the silence that followed, the kind that only happens when something eternal is born. And among them all, Green remembered one moment most vividly. After the proposal, while the camp slept, William had stepped outside the tent, alone. Green had approached quietly to check the perimeter. The prince turned and smiled faintly. "She said yes," he whispered, almost to himself. "I gather, sir," Green said with a grin. William looked up at the endless stars. "I think my mother would have liked her." Green said nothing, but in that instant he saw it. The young boy from Diana's funeral, the weight he carried, and the man he'd become. It was all there, written across his face in the moonlight. The guards never told that story to the press. Not one of them leaked a word. Years later, When Green retired, a journalist approached him. "You were with the prince in Kenya, weren't you?" He nodded but said simply, "What happened there wasn't my story to tell." The journalist pressed, "But surely—" Green interrupted with a small smile. "Some memories belong where they happened. The world's got enough noise. That night was peace." And he meant it. Inside royal circles, a quiet rumor began that the guards had seen something remarkable that night. Even among palace staff, whispers floated. "They say the prince cried before proposing." No one confirmed it, but the idea of it, that moment of raw emotion, gave the story a kind of mythic warmth. The proposal wasn't just elegant or cinematic. It was human. It reminded people that even royalty could tremble at love's threshold. In time, the guard's tale became part of royal lore, told in fragments, half remembered, always reverent. One younger guard, years later, would recall asking Green during training, "Did it really happen like they say?" Green just smiled. "Better. You can't write moments like that, you live them." When Prince George was born years later, the guards who'd served in Kenya received a small envelope each, marked with a royal crest. Inside was a card that read, "To those who protected our beginning, thank you, William and Catherine." No one outside the regiment ever saw those cards. They were kept tucked in drawers, framed quietly on walls, or carried folded in wallets, reminders of a night when their duty had touched something sacred. For the royal guards, it had been more than a mission. It was a story that rewrote their understanding of service itself. Because sometimes the most important thing a guard can protect isn't a person. It's a moment, the kind that defines a lifetime. And for them, that night in Kenya would forever be known by one simple phrase, whispered in respect whenever the topic arose. We saw the future king become a man. Morning broke over London with a quiet kind of anticipation. The air carried that crisp, unspoken tension that often arrives before history changes course. Cameras lined the palace gates. Reporters whispered predictions. Crowds gathered beneath umbrellas, holding signs that read, "We love you, William and Kate." But inside Clarence's house, far from the noise, Prince William sat with a small velvet box in his hand. The same sapphire ring that had once crossed continents, hidden in a leather pouch under the African stars. It was no longer a secret. The world was about to know. The official announcement came just after 10 a.m. The palace released a statement. His Royal Highness Prince William of Wales is delighted to announce his engagement to Miss Catherine Middleton. Just 20 words. Simple, precise. Yet those words rippled across the globe like an earthquake of joy. Within hours, headlines lit up from New York to Nairobi. The ring, Diana's ring, became a symbol of legacy reborn. The photographs of Kate, radiant and shy beside William, swept across every screen. But behind that royal poise, few knew how deeply emotional the moment truly was. When the camera stopped flashing and the interview lights dimmed, Kate had turned to William and whispered, "They'll all talk about the ring, but what I remember is the look on your face that night in Kenya." William smiled softly. "That's exactly how I want it remembered." In the Royal Guards barracks that afternoon, the men stood silently watching the televised announcement. Green leaned back, arms folded, a proud smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "Well, gentlemen," he said, "there it is, history confirmed." Corporal Mason raised a mug of tea. To the night that started it all. They toasted quietly. No champagne, no ceremony, just a soldier's salute to a moment they had sworn to keep sacred. For them, the world's cheers were an echo of something they'd already witnessed in silence. Under moonlight, not chandeliers. The months that followed were a blur of preparation. The palace buzzed with tailors, planners, florists, and advisors. Every detail was measured, weighed, and reviewed by tradition. But within all the noise, William and Kate kept returning to memory of that quiet night in Africa. They spoke of it often, not as an escape, but as a compass. When the royal advisors debated guest lists and protocols, William would lean over and whisper, "Let's keep it simple." Kate would smile knowingly. Like Kenya, even amid the grandeur of Westminster Abbey's upcoming spectacle, they never forgot the simplicity of where it all began. Two people, one question, and the African wind whispering approval. On April 29th, 2011, the day finally came. The bells of Westminster Abbey rang like thunder over London. The world stopped to watch. Kate stepped out of the car in that now legendary gown, lace and satin, elegant but not ostentatious. The crowd gasped. William, waiting inside, exhaled deeply as she approached down the aisle. For a fleeting second, he saw not the future queen walking toward him, but the woman beneath the starlit Kenyan sky, barefoot in the dust, laughing softly as she said yes. And when she reached him, he whispered, just loud enough for her to hear, "You look just as you did that night." Her lips curved into the faintest smile. "You mean terrified?" He chuckled. "No, certain." Among the vast ocean of guests sat a handful of faces unnoticed by the press. Royal guards in ceremonial uniform, their medals gleaming faintly under the Abbey lights. Thomas Green stood at the back, stoic as ever, yet his mind wasn't on protocol. As the couple exchanged vows, his thoughts drifted back to the soft rustle of African grass and the sound of a prince's trembling voice asking a question that changed everything. He'd been in war zones, stood on palace steps, guarded the queen herself, but this, he later admitted, was the proudest moment of his service. When the crowd erupted in cheers and the bells thundered, Green blinked away something that might have been a tear. "Mission complete," he whispered to himself. The royal couple's first kiss on the balcony became the defining image of a generation. Pure, genuine, unfiltered joy. For millions watching around the world, it was fairy tale perfection. But for the guards who had stood with him in Kenya, it was something deeper. Not a fairy tale, but a full circle. From the wilderness to Westminster. From a quiet promise to a public vow. And even as the chants of "Long live the future king" filled the air, there was still that invisible thread tying it all back to a night of honesty under foreign stars. Years passed. Titles changed. Crowns shifted. Children were born. Yet that sapphire, the ring once hidden in a leather pouch, remained the symbol of love that defied expectations. Whenever Kate was seen wearing it, royal watchers wrote headlines about Diana's legacy. But the guards knew it wasn't just Diana's legacy. It was William's courage, Kate's grace, and one simple truth: love doesn't need a crown to be royal. In 2021, on the 10th anniversary of their marriage, William and Kate returned quietly to Kenya. No cameras, no press, no entourage beyond 2 guards. The same camp still stood, a little older, a little quieter. The same hills looked down on them. As the sun dipped below the savannah, Kate leaned her head on William's shoulder. "Feels like yesterday," she said. He smiled. It was where everything started. Thomas Green, now long retired, received a letter weeks later. The envelope bore the Kensington Palace seal. Inside, in William's handwriting, were the words, "To the man who kept our secret and guarded our peace. Thank you for protecting the moment that built a lifetime." Below it, a photograph. The prince and princess, standing hand in hand beneath the same African sunset, the same look of wonder in their eyes. Green framed it quietly in his study. Whenever visitors asked, he'd simply say, that was the night love outranked duty, and that, perhaps, is the quiet magic of their story. The proposal may have happened far from home. The wedding may have echoed through cathedrals, but the soul of their love was born in silence, in the wild where titles fade and truth stands bare. It wasn't just a royal proposal like no other. It was proof that even behind centuries of tradition, the most powerful thing in the world remained something profoundly simple: a man, a woman, and a single word whispered beneath the stars. Yes,